Everybody loves to talk about empathy as everybody's favorite buzzword. But like most things that people say, they clearly have no idea what it actually means. Whenever I say that someone is responsible for their situation, it's their fault that they're fat, it's their fault that they're poor, it's their fault that they're addicts or depressed or anything along those lines, somebody pops up to tell me that I should be more empathetic. But if they understood what that really means, they would understand that I am indeed being empathetic. People describe it as putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And when I put myself in someone else's shoes, say somebody who is calorically inclined, then I understand that the only way for me to wind up in that position is to have eaten too much food and not exercised accordingly. Similarly, if I put myself in somebody else's shoes who is fund deficient, we will say, I understand that the only way that I would have wound up there is if I was to not do anything to change that. If I was to not do things to make money. If I was to blame other people for my situation. If I was to sit around waiting for some mystical handouts or some magical government policies that are all of a sudden going to bestow me with riches. If I was waiting for the powers that be to decide to take money from the people who worked hard and then give it to me. That is the only way in which I could ever wind up in that situation. And regardless of what people would like to say, that's the only way that anyone could wind up in that situation. When I look at somebody who is depressed and I put myself in their shoes, I understand that the only way that I could wind up in that position is if I do depressing things. If I do the things that make me feel good in the moment because all I'm concerned with is being happy, I understand that long term that leads to depression. I understand that if I know that there's things that I'm supposed to be doing and I don't do them, or I do things that I know that I'm not supposed to be doing, then that leads to depression. I understand because I put myself in someone else's shoes why they got to where it is that they are. I understand that if I am an addict, it is because I cultivated the habit of addiction, not because I have some sort of disease, not because of whatever it was that I was going through, not because of the thoughts in my head that I couldn't handle, but because of how I chose to handle those things. I chose to turn to some sort of substances, be that alcohol, be that narcotics of some sort. I am the one who chose to turn to them, and I understand that that is how I would have become an addict. And I understand that that is how all addicts became addicts. And it is exactly because I am empathetic and able to put myself into someone else's shoes that I do not feel bad for people who are in these situations. I do not feel bad for a fat person who blames their body on their genetics and their thyroid because they lack accountability, and that is what you need to change. I do not feel bad for the person who struggles to pay their bills even though they spend their free time watching Netflix and playing video games and going to the club and chasing girls and spends their money on expensive Jordans or whatever else it is that people like to buy these days. I do not feel bad for the person who is depressed and also spends their days sitting around, laying in bed, sleeping in, not working out, not eating properly, hangs around negative people, and does not do anything productive or go after their goals or do anything to follow their purpose in life. I do not feel bad for any of those people because those people have chosen to be where it is that they are. They put themselves in those situations. They could have been in better ones, but they chose to be in worse ones. And why would I feel bad for somebody who is exactly where it is that they have chosen to be? Feeling bad for somebody who is fat is the same thing as feeling bad for somebody who is fit. The person who is fit chose to be fit. They chose to go to the gym. They chose to count their protein. They chose to watch their calories. They chose to turn down certain meals. They chose to exert themselves when they didn't feel like it. And that led to them being in shape. Just as the fat person chose to eat whatever they want, chose to turn down healthy meals in favor of the non-healthy ones in favor of the ones that may have tasted better. They chose to not go to the gym in favor of sleeping or hanging out or whatever it was that they were doing. They chose to do all of these things, and now they wound up fat. But that's where they chose to be. There's nothing to feel bad about. They have succeeded in their arena, in their chosen endeavor. Granted, it was a stupid endeavor, but that's no one's fault but their own. But the point that I'm making in this as a whole is empathy. I think that that has been weaponized because accountability is discouraged in the society that we live in today, because people who are accountable are people who are powerful. People who are accountable are people who have the ability to change, who have the ability to improve themselves, who have the ability to improve their situation. And that is exactly what they do not want people to do. This is why they push the body positivity to encourage people to be fat. They push all of these nonsensical things to encourage people to be their lesser selves, and then they run around with these terms like empathy that they weaponize against anyone who tries to encourage people to do better. When you say to someone, you could make more money if you simply tried harder, you can lose weight if you simply tried harder, you could beat your depression if you simply tried harder, they tell all of these people to be more empathetic, even though that's not what that word actually means, because they know that if they tell people this, most people will back down and feel bad and then tell this person what it is that they would like to hear. And sympathy is or provides a dopamine hit to the person receiving the sympathy. So the more sympathy that the fat people or the poor people or the depressed people get for their situation, the more that they are encouraged to stay in their situation because it is giving them positive things and they want to talk people out of bettering themselves. I also think that they have done the same thing with certain personality disorders like narcissism or sociopathy and things along those lines, because some of these things again are categorized as not having empathy. But not feeling bad for people does not mean that you do not have empathy. Understanding that people have put themselves in their situation and understanding that people are choosing not to better themselves is a result of being empathetic. So when they try and tell you that you are not being empathetic because you do not apologize, sympathize, whatever it is with these people, they are telling you that you should not be telling them the truth, which will prevent them from doing what needs to be done to get better, because they don't want people to get better. Just like a lot of these other traits, they say that very successful people have a bunch of sociopathic traits, and they have painted these things as bad, which subconsciously tells you that succeeding is bad, which subconsciously discourages you from trying to succeed. And this is why you see people running around acting like anybody who has done anything in life, anyone who has accomplished anything in life, has done so through nefarious means. And there's this weird idea that there is some sort of virtue in poverty, that there is some sort of virtue in not doing well and struggling. And that is what they want you to think. It's the same thing with the narcissism. They paint anyone who believes in themselves and speaks highly of themselves as a narcissist. And they've told you that it's bad to be a narcissist, to discourage you from doing these things. But if you really sit there and truly think about it, you are never going to succeed in life if you do not believe that you can succeed in life. You are never going to better yourself if you do not believe that you can better yourself. And that belief at the base of it is the belief that you are better. It is the belief that you are worthy of these things. It is the belief that you are deserving of these things. Lesser people call that having a big ego. Lesser people call that all kinds of negative things. But in reality, this is the basis in building blocks of any degree of actual accomplishments. In order for you to do great things, you have to believe that you are great and then work to prove that. But again, they try and talk you out of having these beliefs. They try to talk you out of believing in yourself and saying these good things about yourself by labeling it as some sort of personality disorder and labeling you as some sort of bad person. They've also weaponized this thing of humble. But if you look up the definition of humble, it is to think less of oneself. They made it seem like it's a virtue to be humble and to have humility, when in reality that is having a lower opinion of yourself. And you are always going to be what it is that you believe yourself to be. If you do not believe that you are amazing, you will never be amazing. If you believe that you are a lesser being, you are always going to be a lesser being. If you do not believe that you can accomplish the things that most people have not accomplished, then you will never accomplish the things that most people have accomplished. And actually doing that takes some degree of what it is that they call narcissism. It takes some degree of what it is that they call sociopathy in order to be able to get these things done. Because if you're sitting there running around with a lower opinion of yourself, feeling bad for everybody who doesn't do anything to improve themselves, you're never going to get anywhere. You're going to run around taking pity on people, and those people are going to take away from your power, even though they've chosen to be in their situation, and you're sitting there feeling bad for them for choices that they have made, is taking away from the work that you could be putting into yourself and then giving back to other people around you. While I'm aware that some people do bad things with these traits, maybe, I am also aware that anything that society as a whole tries to paint as a negative is probably a positive. There are more upsides to having narcissistic traits. Actually, I take that back. You know what? The problem isn't having narcissistic traits. The problem isn't having sociopathic traits. The problem is what you choose to do with these things. What you choose to do with your delusions of grandeur about yourself is what matters. Because at the end of the day, again, you have to believe that you're able to be a thing long before you're actually that thing in order to be able to do that thing. So if you want to do great things in life, you have to have some degree of delusions of grandeur. That's not a problem if you put it to good use. If you have empathy in the sense of you're able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you could do a lot of positive things with that, because you can then prevent yourself from winding up in these less than desirable situations. And you can also steer other people from steer other people away from winding up in these less than desirable situations. All of these things depend on what it is that you do with them. Period. Nothing is blanketly bad. I know people and their little narcissism is a buzzword that they use nowadays, and they just ran it into the ground to mean nothing. But everyone who succeeds in life has some degree of what they would call narcissistic traits. It all depends on what it is that you do with it. But if you go through life afraid to be labeled these things, then you are also never going to do the things that are required to accomplish the things that you would like to accomplish. So be careful of the people who run around. He's a narcissist. Yes, I probably am a narcissist. I think I'm fucking amazing. I love myself. I love looking at myself. People also say this thing too. Like, I'll say something and people will be like, you just love hearing yourself talk. Yes, I absolutely do. And that is why I continue talking. I love hearing myself talk. And you should too, because you're never going to say anything worthwhile if you don't care about the things that you were saying. People tell me that they think I love my reflection. They are correct. Absolutely, I do. While I'm recording this, I could see myself on this TV up here, and I have to stop myself from glancing over and looking at myself, because I love me. And it is because of the fact that I love me that I do things to better myself. I eat healthy because I love me. I work out because I love me. I work hard. I wake up. I do all of these things because I love me. And I want to see myself and see the best possible version of myself because of my love for myself. This is not a bad thing. The only people who are opposed to this are people who have not done anything for themselves. It is the people who lack self-love. It is the fat people, the poor people, the depressed people, the people who don't take time to care for themselves. Act like anyone who does the opposite is something negative, when in reality they are the ones who are the bad people. Those are the ones who you would like to avoid. It is the people who run around talking about their humbleness who are the ones that you would like to avoid, because those are the ones who are going to try and drag you down to their level. It is the people who run around calling everyone who believes in themselves a narcissist that you want to avoid. They are not good people. They are virtue signaling to cover up the fact that they are bad people and not doing anything positive or productive in the world. They are trying to talk people out of doing productive, positive things. You think that someone goes and runs for the president? I'm making no argument about whether or not the president is a good person, but you think somebody goes and runs to be the president and actually makes some sort of change in the world without having what they call narcissistic traits, without believing that they're amazing, without believing that they're great, without loving themselves? No. The only things that are accomplished in the world are things that are done by people who love themselves. The people who make the world a better place are the people who love themselves. But they've painted self-love as a bad thing to try and talk people out of having it because they don't want you to be great. They want you to be fat. They want you to be weird. They want you to be broke. And they want you to be subservient. Fuck all of that.